What are conditional statements? Conditional statements are code which decides if a specific code will run or not run. So you can already see we have two options. It can either run or not run. And that means that conditional statements are always Boolean data types. We can put this whole thing into pseudocode. So we have, if the condition is true, then run the code. And we have, if condition is false, then do not run the code. Let's put the pseudocode into real code. And for that we will use JavaScript, because it's the most widely used language. But the general syntax is pretty similar in all of these languages. So if you understand it in JavaScript, you will also understand it in every single other programming language. To write a conditional statement, we use if, brackets, and then curly brackets. And inside these round brackets, we will put our condition. So in our case, we put the condition if the variable x equals 8, then document.write test semicolon. Don't forget the semicolon. And document.write simply displays the text that we write inside these brackets onto our website. So we have a logic: if this condition is true, then run this code. And we can check it. We can open our website and we can refresh it. And as you can see, here it displays text. And let's say, for example, we falsify this condition. So if x equals 5, which is false, and it should not run this code. We can test it, we can refresh our web page, and here you see test disappears. Here on the right we have a diagram which shows the logic, and we got our condition, and if this condition is true, then it runs the code, and here our condition is if x equals 8. And the other option is that the condition is false, so if x equals 5, then it does not run the code inside the curly brackets. And as you already saw, if the condition is false, then this whole if statement does nothing. But let's say, for example, that we want this code to do something if the condition is false. Now, how do we do that? We do this with the else statement. So else curly brackets. And in this case, if the condition is false, then it runs the code inside the else curly brackets. Now let's program this whole thing. So we write else curly brackets document.write our else test semicolon, semicolon. And now let's go to our website and refresh it, and you see it displays our else test, because x is not equals 5, so it goes to the else and runs the code inside the else curly brackets. Here once again we see the whole logic on the right side. And now the next thing we will learn is to create multiple conditions. So what if we want more than one condition? How do we do that? We do that with the else if statement. And we already learned about the else statement, and we already learned the if brackets statement, and now the else if statement just combines these two, and we just put it right after the curly brackets from the if statement. And yes, let's program it. So we need to create some space, and we write else if brackets, and here we put the condition if x equals 8, then curly brackets document dot write text number 3 semicolon, and we can put this else back to its place. And now we can go to our website and refresh it. And as you can see, here it displays text number 3 because it first checks if x equals 5, which is false, so it goes to the else if statement. If x equals 8, this is true, so it runs the code inside these curly brackets, this code. So here again on the right side we got our diagram, and on the left side we got the code that we just created. The code looks a bit different because the spaces are a bit larger, but it's the same code. So we have our if statement, and this condition can either be true or false. If this condition is true, then it will run the code inside the curly brackets. And the rest of the code, the else if statement and the else statement, will be ignored. If the condition is false, then it will go to the else if statement. And here, once again, we have two options. The condition can be either true. If that's the case, it will run the code inside the curly brackets. Or the condition can be false, and if that's the case, it will run the code inside the else curly brackets. Also, on a side note, you can create multiple else if statements. So here we only have one, but you can create as many else if statements as you want. So last but not least, here we see a small comparison between JavaScript, PHP, C and Python. Because in the beginning I said that the syntax in all of these languages is pretty much the same, and you can clearly see that the syntax and the structure of the if else statements are all pretty similar. Of course, Python is a bit of an outlier because it uses less brackets, but even with Python you can clearly see that it has the same structure as all of these other languages. So if you understand the JavaScript version, you also understand the PHP, C and Python version of if-else statements.